Good afternoon. Welcome to Marketing Live for Thursday, June 25th, 2015. I'm Rob Zinkan. I serve as Associate Vice President for Marketing at Indiana University. Today I'm coming to you from Ann Arbor on the campus of the University of Michigan, which has been hosting the Big Ten Plus News and Marketing Conference the past few days. Special thanks to my friend and colleague Steve Bush, brand manager at UMichigan, for hooking me up with a space for today's show. And this afternoon, our topic is Breathe Life into Your Brand Strategy. Marketing Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development shows and podcasts which are always free and accessible to you in the archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Please be a part of our broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. Also, you can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Today's show would not be possible without the terrific support from both M. Stoner and FormStack. Marketing Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. M. Stoner is offering free 30-minute print consultations this summer. If you're interested in having your suite of admission or advancement materials reviewed, take advantage. We'll be tweeting out a link where you can learn more and sign up. FormStack is an online form builder and your go-to tool for higher ed web conversions. FormStack makes it easy for marketers to create branded, mobile-ready web forms without writing code, build donation forms, application forms, event registrations, and more with the web's only Section 508 compliant form builder. Interact with your audience on social media using FormStack's Facebook tab or social media autofill features. For even more conversions, use FormStack's robust analytics data to refine your form. FormStack also partners with popular marketing applications so you can nurture your leads more effectively. Visit formstack.com to learn more about the ways FormStack can double your response rates and increase conversions today. So let's begin. It's a star-studded lineup today with two experts in the field. Jason Simon is Vice President and Partner at Simpson Scarborough. He is a recognized higher education marketing leader, having served in marketing communications leadership roles for the University of California and North Carolina State University. His area of focus and expertise is in helping craft university brand strategies and, as we'll discuss today, bringing them to life. He serves as co-chair of the AMA's Symposium for the Marketing of Higher Education, and we want to hear more about that later in the show. And he's also penned articles or been featured in Case Currents, Marketing News, the New York Times, NPR, and other social media outlets. Jason was actually here in Ann Arbor for the Big Ten Plus News and Marketing Conference yesterday. It was great to see you then, and thanks so much for being a part of the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Rob.
Nikki Brown is Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at Syracuse University. She has quite a track record of success at Syracuse, working in positions of increasing responsibility since 1999. Nikki leads the Office of Communications and Marketing, and her team is charged with cultivating a strong and consistent brand across the institution and throughout the national and international marketplace. Her portfolio includes the university's enrollment management marketing and communications, development marketing and communications, and alumni communications. Welcome, Nikki. Glad to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks a lot, Rob.
So, okay, that's the official stuff. So how about something about yourself that's not part of your official bio that people should know about you? Professional, personal, whatever. I see, Jason, you're representing the Big Ten with the Draymond Green shirt with your world champion, NBA champion, Golden State Warriors. So let's start with you.
Yeah, it's been quite a week or month or 2 months of the NBA playoffs out here in Oakland, California, and I was lucky enough to attend Game 2 of the NBA Finals. It was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, they lost that game, but you had a sense that it was going to be a long series and there was a lot of time left. And yeah, I'm repping Draymond Green for my friends at Michigan State. Draymond is my favorite player. I think I love his Saginaw pride. That's what he talks about all the time. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun with the NBA Finals.
All right, Nikki, and how about you? What is not in your bio? Any interesting tidbits that we wouldn't get from that?
I've got something a little bit further in the past. When I learned to water ski back home, I actually learned near where they did the live footage for the original Jaws movie. So that was pretty inspiring to stay, motivating to stay above the water. So that's my little tidbit.
Excellent. Those are two really good ones. So great. Well, I want to start with the CASE Annual Conference on Marketing and Branding. The two of you co-chaired that back in the spring. So before we get into the specifics of today's topic, I'd like to look back to that conference and hear from both of you in terms of what were the themes, what were the key takeaways that emerged from the conference and your discussions and presentations with colleagues there.
I think from my perspective, we heard a lot about people learning to do more with less. There are certainly more tools at our disposal these days, but we're not seeing the same kind of increase in staff. So I think that was one of the things that we heard about a lot, and also demonstrating ROI was a huge one, just in order to get the kind of support that we need to do our jobs properly. So that definitely came out from my end, and there are a bunch of other things as well. Jason, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I've been involved in that conference now for a couple of years, and first of all, I think one thing that's just interesting to observe for a lot of people on campus is CASE has really taken I think a really proactive role in trying to be much more engaged and providing more direct resources for marketers on campus. CASE has traditionally been much more around advancement and fundraising, and the lines I think between advancement, fundraising, marketing, communications, enrollment, all of those things are beginning to blur, and I think CASE has done a nice job of sort of beginning to think about programming that is going to support kind of across the institution. And because of that, the attendance at this annual conference of marketing and branding has really gone up, substantially each of the past few years. I think it's a sign where people are kind of coming together and really thinking about the role that marketing plays and the relationship between advancement and enrollment. So that's kind of at the broadest level. That's one trend. I think the other thing that's interesting too is the attendees. While you always have a mix at any kind of conference like this of experiences and institution type and those kind of things, I think the attendees are becoming much more savvy, and it's not only about sort of the broad brand and institutional identity challenges and those types of things. It's a lot more focused around how to work in a decentralized environment, how to build brand consistency in that kind of decentralized environment, and then even down to tactical things that are really strategic around how do you drive enrollment using digital technology and digital marketing. How can you engage donors in a meaningful way on social. So I think that the topics of conversation have gotten a lot more strategic and focused too. I think that's a really good sign for our industry overall.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the other things too, I think, and it speaks to what Jason just said, is really this growing recognition of focusing on audience needs rather than what the organization wants to push out. I know that we're about to do an overhaul of our website, and our website at the moment is a poster child of the org structure up there for everyone to see, and that was driven in part by some of internal politics and really wanting to push our message out rather than recognizing what audiences need to hear. And I think we're seeing a growing recognition of that across the university and other universities as well, and that's being reflected in some of the priorities that we're seeing.
Great. And the point about the industry, and obviously we all work in an evolving industry with marketing and branding coming to the forefront more and more. So anything else on the discussion around the state of the industry when it comes to higher ed marketing that you took away from those meetings?
Yeah, I mean, some of the themes that I think are constant and consistent all the time are that marketing communications professionals are always challenged by a lack of resources and a lack of budget and a lack of really clear direction and leadership on goals and objectives, things that they should be driving and supporting. And really challenged around, like as I mentioned before, trying to work in a decentralized environment. I think that one of the things that I always really try to emphasize is I don't think any of that is ever really going to change. You know, I think that those are constants that people that are in this industry are going to always be facing. I think the good news, however, is that most institutions are now seeing the really critical role that marketing can play in helping solve some of those key institutional challenges that they're having. And so more and more, I think marketing leaders and folks in marketing roles are being asked to really work on really critical things that move beyond you know, just the P of promotion, and really starting to look at things like product and price in the mix there. And I think that that's a really interesting trend too. You know, we had a couple of speakers that were there from smaller institutions, and you know, they play really key roles in reaching and driving specific goals at their institution, whether those are big, huge challenges around you know, the overall role in an enrollment, or it may be something really focused around spending time, you know, really trying to drive enrollment and awareness in specific academic programs. And so I think that that's kind of an interesting twist there. You know, that while the big challenges are there, more and more people are getting pulled into the little things that really make a critical difference too.
It's a great way to set context for our discussion today. And with the topic of breathing life into your brand strategy, I wanted to set a bit more context with the Marketing Live show. Last month was my first show, and the topic was the state of higher ed branding. And we looked at the results of a survey of marketing leaders that M. Stoner had released earlier this year, which took a more focused look at the degree to which institutions have developed formal research-based brand strategies. And without question, brand strategy work should certainly be a process, not a project. And today, looking at what exactly happens after the launch of a campaign, knowing that it is ongoing and it is a process. So for background information, Nikki, in terms of brand strategy, you mentioned the website work that's coming up at Syracuse. Where are you in that process, that brand strategy work at Syracuse right now?
We're still in a relatively early stage. We did a lot of research, actually, with Simpson Scarborough, comprehensive research, probably across around 7,000 people. So it was qualitative and quantitative, and that was completed about a year ago. Part of the challenge for us is we have new leadership at the university right now, so that has helped in some ways, because there is a very strong recognition of the need for marketing, but we've also gone through realigning some other parts of the university, so our academic strategic plan, as well as our mission and vision statements that were just approved by the Chancellor. So of course they all need to feed into what we've been doing. So one of the things that our new Chancellor wanted to do almost immediately was, for want of better terms, stop the bleeding. We had 1 million logos around the university, a lot of different look and feels. Some of our stronger brands like Newhouse and Maxwell were completely dissociating themselves from the rest of the university, so we really had to step in and stop that with some interim brand guidelines that we worked with people across the university to put together on a really short time frame, I think a couple of months, and those were instituted in February. At the same time, we issued an RFP for a comprehensive brand identity system that will really take a look at our positioning, probably do some additional research, and come up with things such as our lexicon, the look and feel, all of the graphic elements that we need. So we completed that process in May, and we're just finalising now all the fun legal arrangements when you hire a group. But we'll be working with Pentagram on that, and partnering with Mercury, which is a strategy group. So there is a lot of work to be done. Certainly recognising the fact that there is a lot of politics involved, as I'm sure everyone here knows. We were very expansive when we put together the selection teams, and will continue to be. So the first one, we had a number of our deans on. We also had students and faculty and alumni, and we'll be mimicking that process as we move forward with the project. So we're doing that. At the same time, we recognize that we need to do something with our website. So we're looking at the architecture right now, the information structure that we have there, and moving forward. So it'll be a busy summer for us.
It sounds like it, and it's really interesting that you're taking an interim approach on the brand identity guidelines, and to make that happen quickly. And at the Big Ten Plus News and Marketing Conference, Steve Bush here at University of Michigan, they've done a really nice job on bringing coherence to their visual identity. And so I'm just curious, any lessons learned that others might be able to benefit from as you've tried to do that on a quick basis or an interim basis to prep for the longer term approach?
Sure. I mean, when we started out doing it, we actually worked with a group that had been working with one part of the university already, so they had familiarity with the university. We have been very careful about telling people that this is an interim system. So, you know, it's not about getting all your old collateral and having a bonfire on the quad. We want to be fiscally smart the way that we do this. This is more about not having any more logos created and paring back some of the things that we're doing, and also communicating to them why we're doing it. I feel like I could go and work at the UN now because I've had so many meetings. Earlier this week I was up in the Adirondacks. We have a retreat space there, talking with people from auxiliary services. So these are the folks that maintain our housing, that do food services, all of those things, because it really does have to be a comprehensive effort throughout the university, and even to the point of getting them to understand that, you know, the brand is not just a logo, it is so much more than that. It's every touch point that people have with the university. And I think there's a growing awareness of that. One of the good things that's also been taking place is we've had a campus master plan process taking place at the same time, and in some ways that has helped people to understand that what we're talking about is really this comprehensive way the university presents itself, rather than these silos that can't be integrated. So I think the big rule or big tips I would have is making sure that you involve as many people as possible. It can be a little frustrating because it takes more time, but the way we've tried to show ourselves is being rational and reassuring. You know, we met with the bookstore and we tried to explain to them, just because we've got a new word mark does not mean you have to put it on every single t-shirt, and here's why. So I think that part of it has worked really well for us.
Great examples. And I want to take this point further about engaging campus stakeholders during the process, but also after launch. And regarding campus buy-in, Jason, we were chatting about this yesterday. I was sharing that at my institution we've completed a university-wide strategic planning process, and that the senior administrator who led that process said that, and it's a quote that I remember vividly, that great universities are great because they do a great many things, and that's absolutely the case. But that's certainly a sharp contrast to the heart of brand strategy work, where focus wins and brand positioning is truly about taking a position, knowing that we can't be all things to all people, to all of our target audiences. So give us a sense, how do you manage that type of discussion? How do you manage that conversation across the institution, building buy-in not only as you go, but post-launch as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really critical issue, and you know, to be honest, one of the things that we always talk about at Simpson Scarborough is there's a difference between being unique and being different. And you know, in higher education, we're working in an industry where fundamentally, you know, the product that we are offering is very similar across all kinds of different institutions, especially when you start to categorize those institutions in the way that we all do. You know, a lot of Research One institutions are essentially offering the same product. At times there might be a different mix, but it's the same fundamental offer. And so, you know, I think in our case, finding positions and finding a brand voice that differentiates you, is not necessarily unique, is okay. I don't think we have to necessarily find the one thing that is, you know, solely IU or solely Syracuse or solely any institution. I think that's in some ways, you know, you're chasing the impossible there. However, there are the things that set you apart. And to that point, as we were talking about yesterday, I think it's really interesting. One of the things that we've sort of seen in our research as we've been working with all kinds of different schools is, the more things that you are known for, and the more that the audiences recognize about your institution, generally there's a direct correlation with that and the overall strength of the brand. And so, we see that at the institutions that we work with. For example, we did a study for a school in the Big Ten. One of those schools that you would say is probably one of the top 15 or 20 schools in the country. And when we looked at similar schools and we saw some of the attributes that were associated with those schools, some of the strengths that were associated with those schools, it's funny, we looked at 6 or 7 different schools, and there was one, in this case Stanford, that was known for 15 different things, and the rest of them, while great schools, were known for 5 or 6. And we see that same kind of thing around a depth of understanding, even within different categories of schools. So when we did a similar study for the UC study, for the University of California system, we would see a couple of schools, UC Berkeley and UCLA, that were known for 15 things, and everyone else was known for 5. And so, I think it's not only just the awareness and the size and the visibility of those kinds of institutions, but it really is the strengths then that are associated with those brands. And so the more that you can build a positioning platform that allows you to talk about the complicated whole and sort of bring those other parts of the institution into the mix, I think, the better long-term opportunity that there is brand strength. I think, and Rob, you and I were talking about this yesterday, one of the things that's really interesting to think about now, and this is kind of a little bit of a strategy for our clients, is, how can, especially digital advertising and digital marketing strategies, how can you use those and apply them in a way where you are really trying to build at a programmatic level to build up the programs instead of really just thinking about the brand and at the brand level assuming that that's going to push down. How do you build from the bottom up? And I think that that's something that is I think a really interesting opportunity that's emerging with the way people are thinking about their digital budgets in particular, and being able to do some real targeting there. And I think it'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on. We've spent, I would say, as a trend in marketing communications, we've spent the last few years kind of really being focused on establishing brand identities and positioning. And what happens now when we begin to take a sort of ground-up approach to that at places that have already begun to see their brands stick.
So to the point about that Nikki was making with all the different stakeholder groups on campus that she has engaged, and that's certainly a best practice, typically large-scale, cross-functional involvement across the institution, perhaps even some market research with internal audiences prior to launch. So with your experiences at other institutions or with institutions that you've worked with, how do you continue that sort of that important internal engagement once a campaign is launched? Any recommendations there?
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple things. Research is really critical sort of opportunity to build collective buy-in and understanding. We like the idea that there is always, on the projects that we work on, there is a cross-institutional committee or work group that is brought together to focus on these kind of things. And in fact, we always sort of recommend to our clients that that's happening at 2 levels, that there is a sort of day-to-day work group that's focused on those, but there also is a leadership work group. And I think that the buy-in process is not just related to a specific project and program. I think it's eternal. I think there's always some level of buy-in, but there's also a level of education for your campus and for your campus leadership, and having them constantly bought into the process and understanding what the marketing communication folks are doing. It's kind of an endless loop. I don't see that ever going away, and I think that the more that institutions can make that a part of their process, even if there is as torturous as it may be, even if there is a group of your board that could potentially be focused on marketing communications issues, can wind up being a real asset for you because it provides some level of leadership focus in the long haul.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. You know, we have a central communications group here, and in terms of getting everyone from the schools and colleges together with our central operation, and having worked both in a school and college and also centrally, it can be really isolating when you're in one of those more satellite kind of roles. And so what we try to do is, we have a listserv, but also meet, and then you know, a couple of times a year have a retreat so that we can get together, bring a guest speaker so that we've got some information that is useful to people. And I think it's just a really good bonding experience for people as well. So I definitely think that engaging your colleagues in ways and listening to them. I mean, quite often there are things that we at a central level, it just doesn't occur to us what problems or challenges they might be facing, and they more often than not are the ones that are dealing directly with the faculty. So it's a great channel for us to hear what's being said at that front as well.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So, Jason, you had recently written a blog post about this topic, related to this topic, and living your higher ed brand. And could you share some examples of institutions that you see as big ones that are truly living their brand, and how they're doing this and how they're experiencing success in doing that?
Yeah, I was really struck. When Arizona State University announced the opportunity to take the MOOC programs that they were offering and to take credit, and to do that for free until you earn the credit. And you know, it really pushed me to sort of go and dig a little bit deeper. And we've not worked with Arizona State. Certainly, that's an institution that's been in the news a lot, and they have a very, very dynamic leader who certainly, Michael Crow, certainly has a voice in higher education writ large, and they've done so many interesting things there. You know, whether it's that program with edX, or they launched the Starbucks program, or all kinds of other things. And when I sort of began to try to do a little bit of digging deep, one of the things that I noticed was, wow, you know, here's an institution that has just dramatically grown its enrollment over the last decade, and has done so in the midst of some major budget cuts, and some major budget cuts that continue, you know, to the point that they may get no funding at all in the state of Arizona, you know, at some point in the not too distant future. And how did they do it? And you know, one of the things that I really kind of found out was, when Michael Crow was there, you know, they went through a dramatic step of really rewriting their charter, you know, their mission in their case, and building their entire brand around inclusivity instead of exclusivity, which really goes in the face of, you know, what a lot of top tier public research institutions are doing right now. And I think that because they really have begun to live that brand, and really build this sort of model of how do we you know, grow enrollment, how do we become inclusive, how do we use technology, how do we model ourselves as this new American university, they've been able to launch all of these really interesting programs, you know, like the partnership with Starbucks and like the edX thing, that I think are living embodiments of their brand, and have really, you know, in the sort of true corporate model, have created new revenue lines for them that didn't exist before. And so, you know, they're creating all of these new opportunities for funding, where the state funding stuff is going to, you know, it's going to continue to be on a constant decline for everybody. And I hate that, but you know, it is a reality that I think those of us in public higher education need to deal with. The other example that I cited was at Chatham University, and I think that, you know, part of what I was trying to point out here is, you know, the change too that's also going on in the marketing leader's role. And at Chatham, you know, this is an institution that was a women's college, and you know, the person who was in charge of marketing there really took a lead role in sort of looking at enrollment, saw that all their enrollment growth was happening in their co-ed programs that they were taking males in on the grad side, but yet the traditional you know, women's only undergrad was on a constant decline. And so this leader, you know, marketing leader, took it upon himself to really do a white paper and study the industry and study what was happening with women's colleges, took that to his president, who then took all of that to the board, and you know, a decision that they'd been kicking down the curb for some time about going co-ed was changed, and they really have built their brand there, now around the place that they're seeing enrollment growth, which is in health sciences and sustainability, rather than just being a women's college. So I think it goes back to the thing that we said right at the beginning, Rob, around the marketing role being a more strategic one than it's ever been.
Yes, yeah. And a reminder, if any viewers have tips or questions for Jason and Nikki, feel free to tweet using the Higher Ed Live hashtag. And the discussion around living your brand, and as you move forward with your process at Syracuse, Nikki, I thought it was an interesting point about your role centrally as you work with colleagues who are at the school level, the unit level, and in the trenches. And how do you foresee that unfolding in terms of ensuring that the faculty and staff, those who are delivering on the brand promise, or who will be, how you're connected to them? You're not controlling, but trying to manage those brand touch points as much as you possibly can.
Well, I think a lot of it is showing your value and showing success. So again, that comes back to the ROI. We have done a lot of work with our research group and building out some areas where we can really start promoting some of the research that's done at the university, because it hasn't been getting the attention that it's needed, and that's something that's very much valued by the faculty as well. So that's proven to be successful for us. And again, to Jason's point, also doing research about the viability of new programs and going out and actually working with people who are going to conduct surveys and find out if there is a market for some programs that we might want to institute or dial back or market them in different ways. And that's something that is appreciated very much by the deans and also by the faculty. So I think really working and positioning ourselves as partners and showing that we are actually here to help them achieve their goals has worked very much for us. So we just continue to do that. But you're right, the people in the schools and colleges have a variety of reporting lines, a variety of skill sets, and that can be a challenge, but I think it's more an opportunity for us to really guide them in the kinds of work that we need them to be doing and show them how we can use some of the stories, the information that they provide to us.
Great, great. Jason, I do want to return to that post, because in that blog post you use the term brand continuum. And tell us more about exactly what that entails. When you use that term, what does that mean?
Oh God, Rob, now you're asking me to recall my thoughts that I probably wrote in a blog post at some point in the middle of the night while on my airplane. But yeah. In some ways, I mean, I think that what I was really trying to get at there was the idea that brands are living organisms, that they there's not a point that it really ends. It's almost like the idea that that I was saying earlier about kind of engaging the leadership groups and other groups on campus. It's not a one-time activity, and even as you go through a large process around beginning to understand and articulate your brand, as Nikki has done and is in the midst of right now, a few years from now you're going to want to know, well, is this still where we are, given sort of the marketplace realities, or given any changes that may come after that point at Syracuse? Not only is this still where we are, but how far have we moved the needle potentially? And so I think that it's interesting to think that about some of the schools that have had more entrenched brand programs that are seen as leaders in our field, and now those schools are going through the same process. They're essentially doing measurement of their brand on a regular basis, and coming back and doing benchmarking. So where they may have done research a couple years ago, now they're coming back and thinking about all those same kinds of things again to know how current it is. And at the University of California, we did that annually and regularly. And so brand continuum really just is this idea that it's a continual process. It's not a one-time effort. And I think that in some ways the same kind of things are true even on the tactical side from a marketing standpoint. As soon as you get a website redone and brought current, I think that a big part of what people are realizing now is we need to have a modular system that allows us to change it in a whim, because things change. And so these big kind of institutional, process-driven things that take a year to change our website, where we've got to bring all these stakeholders in, and we've got to put ourselves into today's reality where our brands have got to be much more nimble. We've got to be able to move really quickly and work on that continuum that I was talking about before.
Well, both of you have referenced ROI and measuring, and I'd mentioned the M. Stoner white paper and research on the state of higher ed branding, and it was interesting. There was a question about how marketers have evaluated the success of their brand strategy efforts, and just over half pointed to business results, namely enrollment, fundraising, and about 35% reported evaluating the results as part of a formal, holistic marketing measurement process. And then there was quantitative tracking process for about 30%, qualitative interviews for just under 30%. But then there was another 27% of those who responded, and they reported that they had no formal measurement processes in place to evaluate the effectiveness of their brand strategy efforts. So a little bit alarming. And I know in a previous presentation, Jason, you had said that higher ed marketers can't figure out what they're trying to affect. And so all of this ties together, and I'm interested to hear from you both. What are your recommendations? What can those who are managing their institution's brands right now, what advice would you give to them? And I know there's a lot to talk about here, but let's start with that.
Well, I mean, I can tell you what we're doing here, and it certainly is early stages and we need to do more, but putting together a dashboard so that we can show other leadership around the university just what we're achieving, I think, is not only helpful for them, it's incredibly helpful for us so that we can see where things are moving. So, if we have an isolated advertising campaign on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, being able to show just how that performed and what the web visits were, all of those sorts of things. We, of course, take a look at our enrollment figures as well. So really this time of year is when we start to gather a lot of statistics, and then probably a few months down we'll do the same thing so that we can see if there's been any shift, probably at the end of this year. But I think getting into that habit of having a dashboard that you can show what's going on and making sure that you measure everything is incredibly important for us.
Jason,
it's funny that Nikki mentions dashboards, because I think that what we're hearing more and more from our clients is that they do want to establish these dashboards that they can regularly look at and have a quick glance at how the brand is being affected on a day-to-day or even some longer time frame, and being able to look at that and share that relatively quickly. In fact, my business partner, Elizabeth Scarborough, is at the GMAC conference today talking about dashboards. One of the things that we've learned is it's like the elusive dashboard. Everybody wants them. Everybody has bits of data pieces, but we haven't been able to actually find any good examples of people with dashboards that are really, really deep and pulling data dynamically and those kind of things. So, I'd love anyone that watches this, if you've got a dashboard that you're proud of, man, you've got an opportunity to get up and share that and be known as a leader in this industry.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is it is certainly a need, and people want to have that information. And I think that the other thing that I would just generally really, really stress is you need to be focused on the institutional objectives that you're supporting. And so I've really found that the more and more we're talking just about marketing objectives and marketing measurements, things like reach and awareness, or even web hits or advertising click-throughs or any things like that, the less and less the rest of leadership wants to pay attention to it. It's important and it's nice to have, but what they really want to know is how are you affecting the bottom line. And so the more you can point to the specific objectives that you're trying to drive and specific areas that you're trying to influence, and direct ties as opposed to indirect in any of those areas, I think is a really important thing to be focused on.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thanks for sharing that, because certainly there are questions around what to measure and how, but then how to share that and communicate that with other senior administrators and with colleagues on campus is an important consideration as well. On the show last month, we had talked about the connection between institutional brand and athletics and some of the opportunities that exist. And Jason, we talked a bit yesterday about the connection between brand strategy work and development. And I wanted you to share a little bit about why the brand strategy work matters to an institution's development activities, and how does the brand come to life when it comes to fundraising.
Well, I think it's really critically important, and as I mentioned even at the very beginning, I think there's been this like historical divide. Either the marketing people report to advancement and they feel like they focus on that too much, or they don't report to advancement and they don't focus on it at all. And I think that has created some real challenges. The reality is that the way in which we engage with alums and donors and friends of the institution is critically important. And I don't care the size of the institution or the size of the endowment. Generating private funds, is always going to be a critical goal. Almost every president that we sit down and talk to about their key objectives, president or chancellor, when we sort of say what are the priorities among these 5 things, they'll always put fundraising in the top 2. And so if the marketing folks are not focused on that, it's a real challenge. The other thing that is just really true is the capital campaigns and fundraising can provide tremendous opportunities for an influx of funding that can really support a marketing communications effort. And you'd be a fool to not try to take advantage of some of that, because trying to engage our alums and our donors is really I think a really critical opportunity, because in today's day and age, one of the things that we're seeing is, besides alumni magazines, the biggest way that people learn about institutions these days is from word of mouth and from social and digital. And news media and all of those other types of things, which none of this should be a surprise to any marketer, are much further down the list. And so your alums in particular, and people that may engage from a fundraising opportunity, they're going to be your biggest brand champions and play a really critical role in expanding a sort of reality about your brand. And so I just feel like that's an area that just needs a lot of focus and a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from experience from our standpoint. We were actually part of development until last year when we were switched over to reporting to enrollment management, and the way that we've structured ourselves is really basically having 4 verticals. 2 of those verticals are dedicated to enrollment management and development. The other 2 are more the products, so web and video and photo, and then just general content guiding those. So it's almost 3 really. But to me, it's ludicrous to think that there's this dividing line between enrollment management and your alumni and fundraising, because it's a continuum. I mean, really, your engagement with people starts when they're prospective students, or not even when they're thinking about being prospective students, and then hopefully they apply, they come to the university, they become an alum, they become maybe a parent and a donor as well, and then you've got people who are children of those donors coming to the university. So for us to start acting in ways that are not consistent with our brand across any of those verticals is really self-defeating. We need to start thinking, to Jason's earlier point, this is a continuum, and this is a living, breathing entity, and we need to treat that in the way that we communicate with our audiences. And I also agree that it is a huge opportunity to get your branding started. In fact, that was really what got us started with a lot of the interim measures that we have. And one of the things that I mentioned at CASE is there can be any number of inflection points that marketers can seize to get the funding that they need. It might be a capital campaign, but it could be an anniversary that's coming up at the university, and you can make the case that you need some additional funding to help with that event. So I think those inflection points can be really useful for marketers.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm curious, Nikki, with the continuum that you mentioned, working on the enrollment management side, marketing and communications there, and then the alumni development side, then bridging that in the current student space, are you touching that? Are you affecting that in any way in terms of communications, in terms of the brand with the current student population?
We absolutely do. We involve the current students as well. I think that we try and be as cohesive as we possibly can with all of the communications that we put out, and we involve our alumni and our donors with our enrollment management operations as well, because to me those really are the proof points. If that to me shows the person that you will become if you're going to come to Syracuse University. So to me that's one of the most powerful messages that you can show, and of course you filter that through the lens of your brand, but this is the worth claim that we're making to people. So you come here, you will be this person, and you'll become this person through the experience that you have at our university. So I think that's really important to show people.
Great.
It's interesting. It's interesting, Rob, that Nick, you mentioned sort of where marketing reports. Does it report to enrollment? Does it report to advancement? Does it report directly to the president? And when we get asked to do organizational organizational assessments, and do that level of consulting, we sort of always find people sort of say, what's the standard, what's the norm? And the reality is there isn't one. And a lot of times there isn't really a strategic reason behind why it reports to something. It's much more of a personality kind of thing, or it's a function of the organization and the people within it. This person had a good relationship with the president when they were there, and fundraising was a priority, so they swiped up other resources, or in some cases it could be the difference, or it may be that a president actually sees that there's a reason and a value in them reporting directly to the president or the chancellor, and I think that that's just a reality of our industry, and will likely probably continue, and it really becomes back on the marketers to accept that, and despite where they report, really advocate for being a resource that works across the institution. It's not like HR, just because they may report to finance, doesn't work for the whole institution. And I think that's the attitude that marketers need to take as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, and it's certainly what we've tried to do. We joke internally that we're kind of like the crown jewels that might get passed from one place to the other for whoever might want to do their work right now, and I think it also speaks to that whole idea of building those relationships around campus that you've referenced, Jason, and it has served us well to do that, because honestly 3 years from now we might be reporting through advancement again, but it's more getting people to understand that this shouldn't be fragmented. This is about telling who we are as an institution, as an entity, a living, breathing entity. So yeah, totally agree with you.
Excellent. Thank you both. I want to make sure we give you a chance, Jason, to plug the AMA Symposium for the Marketing of Higher Education, which you co-chair, and that's coming up in November in Chicago this year, and the conference just continues to grow and grow. So what's in the works coming up this fall?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you bringing it up. I mean, it's a labor of love to be involved in this conference, and I think it's just a really critical resource, honestly, and a point for people across our industry to get together and rub elbows, but also hear from some of their peers and learn some of the things that are going on. The conference, as you said, has grown year after year. It's now closer to 1,200, 1,300 attendees total, and we expect that we'll have a record attendance again this year in Chicago. Because we always have a lot of people in Chicago. It seems to be a great place and a great city that people obviously love to come to. It's November 15th through 18th. We have great sessions already picked, and I think that those will be up on the AMA website at some point within the next couple of weeks. I know that we've got some great keynotes. One of the things that we were really focused on trying to do with some of the keynotes is to be able to have people that are really understanding of sort of not only the issues that our industry is facing, but also some of the larger kind of national trends that may be going on, and how they'll intersect with our institutions. And so, whether that's we have Dan Dillon, who's the Senior Vice President, Chief Marketing Officer at Arizona State, that will talk about the Arizona State experience and living the brand. We also have the head of post-secondary education, Dan Greenstein, from the Gates Foundation. They obviously are, you know, a major funder to all of our institutions and are really driving educational policy. But then we have a couple of other things that I think are more national trends. Sergio Alcacer, who is the president and chief creative officer of an agency called LatinWorks and is one of the probably most decorated creative directors in all of advertising and marketing, is going to bring a unique focus on talking about how to reach in an authentic way the growing Hispanic audience, and I think that that's something that that all of us are facing now with sort of the changing demographics for college-age students in our country. And then Michelle Norris, who is a host on NPR and a correspondent on NPR, is going to talk a little bit about you know, the racial divide that's going on in our country right now, getting worse every day, and you know, how our campuses are really the place where a lot of those discussions are happening, and should be the place where a lot of those discussions are happening, and how we deal with that reality and talk about diversity in an authentic and real way. So I feel like we've got a great conference, from the keynotes to, you know, we have an advanced session with folks from LinkedIn. I know that that is a channel that a lot of people are interested in sort of figuring out how they can best take advantage of it, and all kinds of really great things. And so I would really just encourage anyone who's listening to not only plan on attending, but plan on getting engaged in that AMA community.
Terrific. Sounds like a great conference, as it has been, and we'll have to devote a future episode in the coming months to preview the AMA conference. Well, I certainly appreciate the great insights from both of you. And before we wrap up, any final thoughts, recommendations, considerations for colleagues as they think about ways each and every day that they can bring their brand to life through the work of their faculty and staff with whom they work on a daily basis at their college and university? Any final words of wisdom to share?
Well, I'll jump in there, and really my word of wisdom would be for everyone to make sure that they get a good vacation this summer, because the needs as higher education marketers are endless, and the list of things to do it is probably even longer, and if you don't take a good vacation and unplug yourself from all of this, I think you'll drive yourself crazy in this industry.
I can agree with that, and I would also say just that whole idea of team building. I think it's critical, because there is a lot to do, and so you need to make sure you've got great people around you and treat them well. So.
Okay, great. Well, let's go on vacation. So thank you. Thank you again to Jason Simon and Nikki Brown, today's Marketing Live guests, for sharing your time and expertise. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
And thanks, as always, to M. Stoner for producing and supporting the show, and to FormStack, another great program sponsor. Be sure to get reminders about this and other shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. I'm Rob Zinkan. We'll be back in July with more content for you on Marketing Live on the Higher Ed Live Network.